As the energy that powers the nation's success, St. Lucia's Electricity Services Limited has one main goal as the country grapples with the COVID-19 pandemic, that is, to keep the pandemic outside the power plants and ensure the lights stay on. Lucelec Managing Director Trevor Louisi says protecting staff was a necessary first step.
The country needed us to be at our usual best, and certainly we were reliable and dependable throughout the pandemic and the various waves of infections St. Lucia experienced. Achieving that objective and the apparent ease with which it was done is perhaps taken for granted. It belies the tremendous effort that went into transforming our work processes to work safely, efficiently and effectively within the guidelines for social distancing and the wearing of masks, and in many cases remotely. The strict sanitizing regimes and protocols for accessing the cul-de-sac power plant, and critical control rooms to minimize the risk of infection, transportation of staff to and from their respective work locations as safely as possible, and to avoid public transportation. The constant reminders to staff about observing the COVID-19 protocols, not only at work, but very importantly, off work, to minimize the risk of infection and transmission.
But Lucelec doesn't exist in a vacuum. And so, in July last year, the company reached out to Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sharon Belmar-George to see how the company could help the country in its COVID-19 response.
At the time, SLASPA was completing work at the airports to facilitate the screening facilities for arriving passengers, and the CMO asked if we could cover the cost of extending the electrical infrastructure required. And we did. She also asked about funding some equipment for the respiratory hospital initially. But that request eventually became funding to purchase equipment and supplies to improve PCR testing capacity at the Ezra Long Laboratory at the OKEU Hospital. The total cost of the equipment and supplies was approximately $114,000. And Dr. Felici, I think, can confirm that within 24 hours of receiving the quotations from him, Lucelec was able to inform him that the money had been wired to the suppliers. At that time, in the last quarter of 2020, we were beginning to see an increase in the number of COVID-19 cases, and we wanted to do all we could to get the equipment there quickly.
In May 2021, Lucelec held a symbolic handover for a donation. The donation to the OKEU is part of the almost $750,000 the company has contributed to the COVID-19 national response to date.
We have provided support towards some of the costs of operations for some of the government of St. Lucia quarantine centers, made monetary contributions to the government's national fundraising telethon, to the national feeding program coordinated through the St. Lucia Chamber of Commerce and the St. Lucia Hotel and Tourism Association, and to purchase digital devices through the OECS Commission for students in need to facilitate online schooling. All of these were in the early stages of the pandemic.
Helping customers was also part of the company's COVID-19 response, and so the company took the decision to discontinue disconnections for arrears since February last year, working with customers to manage their accounts. That decision remained in place for 15 months. Joachim Duplessis, HDS News Force.